Today, in our main topic here on Mastering Dungeons, we're going to continue our look at the game design industry and what it takes to become a game designer. We've looked at what Wizards of the Coast seems to be looking for. We've looked at what other publishers are looking for. And now we're going to get into our little time machines. And we are going to go back in time to look at the lessons that we, Teos and I, learned early in our TTRPG game design careers. Mistakes we made, lessons we learned, that sort of thing. Because I'm pretty soon I won't even be able to remember that far back. So I figured we should get this down on record now.
Too real, yeah.
So we can have a memento of what happened then.
It's true.
And there was a question that came in just today that covers a portion of this that I thought it was interesting enough to have the question be asked so we could start to answer it in this segment. This is from Unraveled Archives via Blue Sky. Hey, long-time listener here, but first time actually asking a question. How do you build a community? I don't really mean marketing so much, but what are good ways to build up some genuine, meaningful, lasting relationships within the TTRPG space, specifically as a game designer? So I don't know how Teos feels about this, but my path to being a full-time game designer and writer is paved by bricks laid by others who are a part of what I would consider my community. Without those folks, I definitely would not be doing what I'm doing right now. So as we talk about these lessons, we will talk also about this idea of community and this idea of how to build one, with the caveat that everyone's path will be different because everybody is different. And the way I made a community will be different than the way Teos did, will be different than the way you might, based on who you are as a person. What do you think, Teos?
Yeah, and I would even say that there are a couple of ways of looking at this word community, right? And there was this mention of sort of marketing. So there is community in terms of like your fellow design community that you can turn to for advice, for support, for work sometimes. For a kind, hey, how about, Shawn's available, Teos is available, that kind of thing. That's very, very important, very key. There's also community in the sense of people who will support you, right? Whether it's on a Patreon or buying your product or even telling other people about your product. And that's often something that gets a lot of attention because folks think, I'm going to publish this thing. Will it get backers, right? And so what's my community that's following along and might support that, and that's very hard to build as well for sort of different reasons.
Yeah, as a game designer, the marketing stuff is secondary. It's that community of players and game masters and designers and people who just love the hobby. Some people come to it by building an audience first and then becoming a game designer. And that's okay. But that's not the path that I could have taken, would have been able to take. I had to learn by doing the thing that I wanted to do, not do something else to get to the point where I could do the thing I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it really, you are working for other companies and with other companies the majority of the time. And that has historically been what I've also done. But I've increasingly been trying to do things that are more where I'm the owner or a part owner of it. And the more that you do that, the more that you need to have to succeed, you need to have the underlying community, right? So if I'm writing for, Wizards of the Coast, or I'm writing for MCDM, they have their community. MCDM is a great example, right? They have their community that is just huge, right? Rabid fans who are going to buy whatever is created, and I'm getting paid a word rate. I don't have to worry about the community angle. I can just do my work, right? And then what I need is that community of people who help me create well and keep me going through the hard times sort of emotionally and that kind of support. And I may have fans who get excited, but MCDM's fans will carry the sales of that item. I don't need to worry. Plus, I'm not getting paid for those sales. I'm getting paid upfront. But if I'm going to make my own product, that's where somebody must hear about it to even think about buying it. And so that community becomes really important. And I think the way, like if you look at our Mastering Dungeons Patreon or our Discord, we took various leaps at various times of just hoping that it would be there and laying that groundwork. And there was a time when our Patreon Discord was pretty quiet. And we invited some friends in, and and Patreon supporters started coming in. But as it started getting energy, right, where it became like a fun place for people to be, that's where it really began to grow, right? And as we reached more people by having our own channel versus through somebody else, the community came. How did we do that? I don't know that you and I even know, but we did take concerted, slow steps towards it, right? And we were not rushing towards a thing. We didn't have a particular goal in mind other than covering our time on this show, right? But we did take those steady steps forward to try to allow for that to where it would make a difference, as it does for us today.
And we came in, which I will get to right now, in a weird space that's somewhere between working for a corporate entity or a business entity and working for ourselves. And that was an organized play system, which had the marketing behind it from this business, but did not have a direct input from the business. We had to build that ourselves.
Yeah.
So I came into the industry, my first projects in game design, other than running my own home games and putting my notes together and so on, was editing and producing Living Greyhawk, the organized play campaign from Wizards of the Coast for 3rd edition D&D, for the Keoland region of this Living Greyhawk campaign. So I was just a player who had decided it's time to get back into D&D. I didn't have a home group. Let me see if this Living Greyhawk thing. I knew Living City was a thing. I never played it, but it sounded fun and it sounded popular. So let's see how this goes. Oh, look, there's a few people playing locally. All right, I'll reach out to them. Oh, they're pretty cool. So now I have a home group. Hey, look, other people are contributing. Let's see. And so I ended up working for the Living Greyhawk Keoland Triad, just making up some area of Keoland where some adventures could be set. No pay, no glory, nothing. Just, yeah, okay, here's some NPCs, here's an area, here's some cool things that you could do there. And that went from working for them to being one of them. So I was in charge of the adventure. Design, editing, reaching out to freelancers to do. Again, no pay,
right?
Not for me, not for the adventure writers. All volunteer work. But what it did, and what was so special about this, was I was put immediately and intimately in contact with the audience for this medium that we were working in.
Yeah.
If you write a book, you write it, you publish it, it goes out, and if you're lucky, people read it. If you make a movie, you do all the work in it, and then it goes out and people watch it. Unless you go to an author's reading, unless you go to a premiere where the director is speaking, you do not have an intimate contact with that audience. Except for maybe stand-up comedy, this sort of thing is as direct as I've ever seen interaction be with the audience for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
I would run what I'm writing for 6 people and look out and watch 40 other groups of 6 with a game master and players playing the same thing. I could hear the laughter, the groans, the silence, whatever happening.
Yeah.
And that immediate feedback is unlike anything else.
Yeah. And then on the then Yahoo groups, you would hear everybody talking about the premieres, sharing the information to people who weren't there and the excitement and what they liked and didn't like. And a lot of feedback.
Yep. I learned a majority of the audience are amazing folks who just love games and they just want to play and support each other and have fun and tell stories and laugh and be excited. There is a minority of your audience who are not amazing people, who can make life very, very hard for you. And that was important to learn immediately when it wasn't the source of my income, when it wasn't my life.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing teaches you game design, but it puts you in the middle of a community that you are a part of. So any way that you can get out, run games at stores, run games at conventions, whether it's Bald Man Games or Kobold Press or MCDM or any organization that is looking for game masters, if you have the means to get there and try to do that at least once to get the feel for it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I had a similar thought along these lines the other day, just reacting to something. Forget if it was a blog post or something that Andy Demp shared, and then combined with like Shu sharing things and Grant. And I was just thinking, like, a lot of the folks in our Discord who I really think of as just, boy, I can't wait to see what they create, 2 years from now, are involved heavily in organized play. And we kind of say like, hey, that organized play thing, it's sort of like writing to Dungeon Magazine or Dragon Magazine. Like, you can't really do that today. But you can actually still do what we did in organized play. You might actually even get paid a little more, not a ton more, but it's at least not volunteer effort. And you do learn all these things, right? Because again, exactly what you're talking about, of the audience is right there, the feedback is right there. You can have a convention, run your con and go to it and see it, right? Like people at Gamehole that will, after Gamehole, will say, yeah, I got to see how people liked my adventure, right? And that feedback is right there. And that's really cool. And you become part of that community of Baldwin Games, of Adventures League. And that feedback is very helpful to hear what other people are doing, what DMs are struggling with. And you're running lots of games and playing lots of games. That is an invaluable source of like a training camp, right? And like you, I started an organized play as well. I was volunteering in the Jeff region of the Living Greyhawk. And it was much lower key than your being a triad. I was working with triads and others, but I did things like head up a meta organization, right? Write up what the Rangers were like as a military unit, or the Longbowmen, and what they did, and build interactives and contribute to adventures, and all of that just started to put those pieces together of what I saw as player and DM and into designer. And invaluable experience that I still rely upon today.
And this goes to another point I was thinking about, which is learning anything is an investment. It's an investment of time, of money, of effort. I probably did 8 years of full-time labor, practically for no financial gain. Now, I was in a position of privilege to be able to do that. I had a good paying job that I didn't have to take work home. Well, technically I did because I worked from home, but I had my evenings free and my weekends free to do these things. And I had a supportive spouse and a supportive family. And so that's not available to everyone. And I recognize that, and everyone should recognize that. But at some point, you will have to learn, and there may not be an immediate financial gain from that learning. Now, if you can turn that into financial gain, great, do so. But there's a reason that they had apprenticeships, and there's a reason they had these sorts of things, because you needed to spend the time doing the thing to learn to do it professionally.
Yeah, the time spent is absolutely critical. I think that folks today kind of don't appreciate that, and also, or maybe it's less that they don't appreciate it, but that it is what you see overwhelmingly is people touting the thing that may or may not be successful that they are touting as success. And you
Mhm.
see it in social media and all over the place. And so it feels like if you just did a little more, maybe you would attain that. Whereas I
Mhm.
think that when you and I were starting out, what you had was a lot lower tier, right? There were fewer rungs to climb to. I mean, if you were a warm body willing to do some things, you would probably get some ability to contribute to an organized play campaign region in some
Mhm.
small way. And then if you were kind of good at it, you would get more work. And but there wasn't a huge ceiling to get past that, and we weren't on social media saying like just wrote the latest adventure for blah blah blah, just role played being a big giant monster at the interactive. Like it was much right. There wasn't that sort of headspace going on, which made it a
Mhm.
lot easier to spend all these years, in your 8 years, however many years, just because you were just doing it because you wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
And meanwhile learning all this. But that is different now, right? There is a different sense of people think if I could just get a job for insert a company here, well, everything would be great. When that's
Yeah.
not factually, that is, no, it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It you just touched on like 3 points I want to talk about. So in my head, I'm like trying to arrange them in order. One of them is that social media has changed the way everything works in the world.
Hmm.
But then the internet changed the way everything works
Hmm.
in the world. And before that, right, computers changed everything the way
Yeah.
things work. And before that, electricity changed everything the way. But there, while it changed the way the world works, there are inherent truths about the world that can be seen through all things. And one of those things is it's got to be about the work if the work is what you want.
Hmm.
If you want to write adventures, you need to write adventures. You can't dream about writing adventures while scrolling on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky or you name it.
Hmm.
Just like back then, you couldn't spend your entire day posting on Yahoo groups and posting in chat rooms
Yeah.
and posting, right? And just like before that, you couldn't spend all day. It it's fine to check in, but then you also have to check out
Yeah.
and make it about what it is that you're working on, because so many people that I worked with back then and work with still today, I can tell they're talented and I can tell that they want this, but I also see them saying this is going to be late, or I don't know how to do this, or I don't have time to do this until next week. But then I go onto Facebook and they've got 27 pages worth
Mhm.
of right. And
Mike
so,
Shea, Mike Shea used to say to me, if you took that Twitter post and made it a blog post, and I would say, you're
right.
right, Mike. You're right. Like I really like get off of
Yeah.
this giant long series of threads and make it a blog post, right? Or make it a product. And that is still something that I try to remind myself today.
Yeah. 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 And again, there's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
putting your
Sure.
work up and using social media and using these tools. But at the end of the day, you have to say, what is it that I want? If
Hmm.
what you want is not really to be writing or designing a game or writing, but talking about something else, then just do the thing that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yep.
Do that, uh, and save yourself the struggle of not really doing the thing that you want.
Yeah.
Uh, One thing I learned really early was good, clear, concise writing is more important than any level of advanced game knowledge.
Yeah.
For a tabletop role playing game, the written word, despite YouTube and Twitch and all of those tools, the written word is still monarch.
Yeah.
And so if you cannot take the ideas you have and put them into clear, concise sentences that go into clear, concise paragraphs that turn into clear and concise sections, uh, you cannot successfully deliver the ideas that are percolating in the head,
Yeah.
no matter how great those
Right.
ideas are.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've worked with folks who've turned things into me that I love those ideas, but I had to spend so much work doing it. And, that is a problem. Um,
Mhm.
I want to take a little step back to something we've been dancing around, and that is the issue of pay, right? And so one of the lessons
Mhm.
learned as I've been through this is my privilege is in having a great paying job where I get paid hourly
Mhm.
because I'm a contractor on these projects that I do on the environmental side of my life. And the problem, that's great. The problem is, boy, do I love creating RPG material, but I have to weigh it against my day job. And I'm very lucky to do that, but it puts it in stark contrast. And so, like on
Mhm.
Success in RPGs, I broke down the how many words would you have to write per year to have a livable wage in the US? And it's a shocking amount of words. Like it's more words than I think most people who want to be in the writing business would say they can write in a word in a
Mhm.
year. Or if you think of it as like small projects, how many of those projects do you need to land in a year to have a livable wage in the average US? And that is a shocking number of projects. Like if you think of just landing that many opportunities, it's daunting, right? And so that calculus is important because a lot of times folks shoot today straight past what we did of volunteer for 8 years and just
Mhm.
having fun, doing stuff and they go straight to, hey, I want this to be my full time job. And there are very few people who can do what you do and actually be full time for other companies, right? Or,
Mhm.
how many Mike Shays are there? There's one. His name
Mhm.
is Mike Shea. Like there are
Yeah.
not three Mike Shays, right?
No.
And Shadow Dark, right? How
Mhm.
many Kelseys are there? There is one Kelsey, right? And there may be
Yep.
others that are a little bit like it, but they are pretty much unique snowflakes of
Mhm.
awesomeness that have managed to get there through hard work and skill and all of that. But
Mhm.
by threading needles through the financial
Yeah.
trouble that is our industry.
Yeah. And you can study, right? You can do an MBA type analysis
Yeah.
of how Mike or how Kelsey did what they did,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be almost impossible to replicate
Yes.
as soon as you are outside of the exact time, the exact place, and the exact skill set that they used.
Well, and
Uh,
and even I would say that they are very special people that are absolutely great at doing what they are
sure.
doing and they know
Yeah.
what they're doing. And that
Mhm.
is a really hard thing to find, right? Like I don't have it for myself. Like sometimes I have a conversation with myself where I say, if I wanted to succeed like that, I have to do these things. 3 days later, I'm not doing those things. They have the
Sure.
ability to
Yeah.
do exactly what they should be doing, which is a great
Yeah.
skill to have and very, very unique, right?
Right. Which goes back to it's got to be about the work,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be about this is my goal, and let me make those steps to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And if you start doing things outside of that path, then it's no longer about the work. It's about those other things that you're doing outside the
Yeah.
path.
Yeah.
Uh,
True.
one thing I came up with it's along these same lines. There's always an excuse for you not to do your best or do the work. Uh, Sometimes it's an excuse that's perfectly reasonable. Uh, the people who end up succeeding are able to navigate those excuses. They're able to navigate the pitfalls and somehow do the thing that they need to do. Uh,
Yeah.
and if everyone will fail at not just one project, but multiple projects. Uh, I've failed miserably on a project just last month. Totally miserably. I did it, but it was but it was like that was terrible, and I'm never going to do that again. Not even because I didn't want to, because the publisher doesn't want to. The question then becomes why, and how do I eliminate that mistake? How do I eliminate that excuse that I used for that? Why that thing failed?
And it can be hard to assess. Like you and I worked on Confrontation at Candlekeep with Greg Bilsland for Wizards of the Coast. And when I worked on that project, it was sort of a weird project. There was a lot of like stop, go kind of to it. It didn't have a nice rhythm to it. Timing wise, like Wizards was busy. We were busy. And all I know is at the end of the project, I thought to myself, I don't know if this is going to be good. And I almost never feel that way, but I really felt like, I don't know if this would be good. And I was so happy when months later we were seeing the event run at Gen Con and everybody loved it. And some of it was that, Greg added a missing ingredient at the end after their internal playtest and that dragon coming by. That was sweet. But it surprised me that it actually was better than I thought it was. And so one of the things I told myself was, going forward, I don't want to leave the project in that sort of uncertain place. I want to have a better ability to understand what it is that I've created. And if it does have something bad, what is it and how do I get it there? And I think that's helped me a lot in projects to have a better feel for the accuracy of whether what I'm creating is good or not.
Right. And for me, there's a corollary to that, which is no project is perfect because this medium we're working in is imperfect. Right? Role-playing games are not calculus where you start with a formula and then you know that the answer is going to be this if you follow the rules of the mathematical formulas that lead you there. And the people that make the games are imperfect. And the people that run the games are imperfect. And the people that play the games are imperfect. So every project will be a mini failure at something. The question, though, is based on the criteria that you started with, the goal that you were working toward, did you perform to the best of your abilities, giving the final audience the best sort of version of yourself and the game that you could give?
Yeah.
And if you can honestly look at yourself and say, yeah, I did within the means I had the best I could, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a success.
Yeah.
And I think in some projects, all you can do is sort of do your part the best.
Right.
And you are counting on this team, this community that you work with to do the same thing. When we passed things off to Greg, we did the best we could based on the information we had.
Yeah.
Right.
And there were a lot of moving parts, right? There were things like, oh, this is going to be based on the novels. Well, the novel's not going to be done. And so there was a lot that made it difficult. Two contrasting experiences that I had with MCDM, right? So one was writing the adventure, the second part of an adventure that was in their second book. And in their first book, MCDM had James Hake write a really good adventure. And so the first thing I did was read that and go, oh, wow, that's so good. Really good work by James. How do I possibly keep it at this level and feed off of it? Because it's so well done. There's so much here that's fun. And then there were a lot of notes from the MCDM, particularly from Matt. And how could I pull from that so that, because he's an audience member too, right? And so that he is going to like this, and I can honor what he wants out of this, right? Because that is important, while also creating a great system for the players, and that works off of the larger system of kingdoms and warfare that's going on here in this book. And so it was a tall task, but at the end of it, everybody at MCM was really happy with it. And I think the audience really got what they wanted out of it. So it was a real success. And then the next time I'm working with them, I think, was for doing this idea of a character backstory kind of generation, right? This character history that you would develop through the system. And they had ideas for it that weren't going to fit in a book. And that was my first feedback, because I don't know that this is too big a system. You can't put this in the MCDM RPG. It'll take up too much space. And they were like, "Oh, don't worry about the space." And so we were on very different sides of things, right? And so I tried to write to their thing, but in the end, they ended up going like, "Yeah, you were right." So I got paid, but didn't get used. and that is one of the things that hits me the most, is when I do something that nobody's going to see. And I've had bad luck with that over the last 3 years, of major stuff that I was really excited to see come out that will never see the light of day because of larger issues around it, right? It's not a fault of the writing, it's a fault of the larger whatever, the product changes or vision behind it, or the marketing gets canceled or whatever. And that's a darn shame, right? Like, I was going to do a thing related to the D&D movie. I did do some work, and then it went away, and it's like, that would have been really cool. But, and so there's just those things happen. And that also is, I think, an important part of this for a creator, which is to think about, why are you creating what you create? And what does it mean when you got paid, but nobody saw it? And I do less work for other people because of what I've learned of, why do I create? And I create so that people can use it. Right. So when people say they're using Forge of Foes and they love it, that's why I create. Not because I got X money from it, right? And so I now choose my projects a little differently, because too many where, great pay rate and nobody ever saw it. I could do my J job for that.
Yeah. And I, working full time in the industry, still will be picky about what I do. And there is always going to be I'm going to work on that project because that looks like fun. It's not going to be a lot of money, but it's only going to be, a weekend of my time or a week of my time. And we'll just do that. And I've been in the same position you have, as you well know, projects I've worked on that I'm like, oh, so many people are going to see this, and then nobody's going to see it except me. And so my question is always, did my work have anything to do with this project not coming out? And if the answer is no, then I'm like, so be it. I've done all I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much to talk about here. I mean, I didn't even get into like the 4th edition when stuff got real for me in the industry. I mean, everything I've talked about so far was pretty much non-paying stuff. But
one interesting thing I can say about 4th edition was when I started to kind of feel like I'd hit my stride. Like the things I were blogging on were connecting with people. The design I was making was getting a lot of attention. And even in the D&D Next period, right? Like writing Vault of the Dracolich, Confrontation at Candlekeep with you, various other pieces. If you just looked at a tiny widget of time, you might think Teos is on top of the world when it comes to working for Wizards of the Coast. And then it all stopped. and that is not, and I was prepared for that, because I've spoken to some of the people I most admire their work that have done work for Wizards of the Coast, had said to me, and I don't know why I'm not getting work now. And so I was prepared for that possibility always. But it was really interesting to think through sort of two things. One is, as 5th edition came, I was actively asking myself, will I be any good at creating for this next edition? Or was I only good at creating for 4th edition, right? Like, was that a secret mix for me, like that I line up towards that? And so I was glad to know that, no, I actually can, hit the same stride with other things. But then also when one avenue closes off, what else can you find other things to do that are just as, if not more, pleasing? And that answer was also yes. but I had to find that over time, right?
Mhm. Why don't we dive into that next time? We'll go into the 4E,
Cool.
the switch from third edition to fourth edition, game design lessons, sort of business lessons,
Cool.
and so on from that point.
I like it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone out there listening. If you are a patron of the show, like our Master of Dungeon supporters or our Master of the Realm supporters who get a special shout out, thank you so much. You Master of Realm supporters, there's a long list of you in our show notes. So many wonderful people. Our Masters of the Multiverse, well, they get a special shout out on the show. And we have a new leader here, capital A Agile Monk. Thank you for joining us. Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Dave Bastiensen, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Evil John, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, William Harshman of Runeforged Tabletop Gaming, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Sean Hurst, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of The Twilight Perspective, Brian King, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, Mighty Zeus, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Printer from Croatia, Hugnus, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Samosa, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from the Indian TV podcast, Trace, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, The Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and Walt Whitfree. Thank you so much for your support and for being patrons. If you enjoy the show, if you like to hear what we have to say, you can become a patron as well by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. We appreciate your support, whether you can become a patron or not. You could help us out, though, by going to Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to this show and giving us a review. 5 stars, mucho appreciated. You can also subscribe via YouTube by going to youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. Teos, where can people find your work?
Find me at alphastream.org. And let's see, I will have a video coming out very soon. I just had a very short one on how to deal with your computer crashing. Imagine that. So that came out last week, and I've got a couple more on the DMG on their way. And where can we find you, Shawn?
Oh, you can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin, and the podcast is at Mastering D&D on those socials as well, featuring us now on Blue Sky. You can always join our community, of course, and ask questions on our Patreon, leave comments on the YouTube channel, and email us at Mastering D&D, or is it Mastering Dungeons? I already lost it.
Well, if they're complaints, it's at Lorecast. No, it's masteringdnd@gmail.com for all
there you
constructive
go. It's not
comments.
like I created the Gmail thing or anything. Yeah, so you can find me there, or just laying out in the snow making snow angels. So we've given a brief background of our early work and what we've learned from that, Teo. So what, pray tell, are we going to do now?
Rethink everything.
I have done that so many times, I don't even know where to start.
I want that beef background.
Mm-hmm.